are listening to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Sun Show.
Panel, how's everybody doing today? Thank you for coming to the chat. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you. As always, my name is Dave King, and as always, I am joined by Zona Hoop. How you doing this morning, Brandon?
Not bad. Can't complain. 11-game win streak. Another clutch time performance by this team after kind of coasting through the first three quarters. So, got to take these win streaks with a lot, because I don't know if next Saturday I'm going to be able to talk about this win streak still. So, kind of got to soak it in right now.
That's right, man. We'll talk a little bit about the historical nature of this 11-game win streak, but let me introduce our other guest today. We have a guy who's going to help us with this Deandre Ayton debate later on this morning. And good morning, Damon Allred. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Damon writes for Bright Side of the Sun. He also writes a little bit for Zona Hoops, and I think a lot of other places. You've probably seen his name around the internet and on Twitter and all that. And we're really lucky to have you on. Thank you for coming.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
So this is the Solar Panel y'all are listening to. You're watching on YouTube. Solar Panel, always free, always fresh, and always presented by the Basketball Podcast Network. If you guys have the itch to start betting on games, watch that DraftKings promo or the graphic in our lower right corner of your screen. Use promo code TBPN, and you can get extra special deals that are unique to us with DraftKings. All right, so let's start the show. We have 4 quarters of fun for you guys today. We're going to go through each of the different sections, different things. We're going to recap the past week. We're going to preview the next week. But in between, we're going to have this big debate. And so let's go ahead and start
the first quarter.
All right, the first quarter is we're going to recap the last week. The Suns in the past week went 4-0. If you guys remember, those who were with us last week, you guys were watching PLR predicted the 4-0 start, or the 4-0 run for the Suns in the past week. They beat the Mavs twice, partially because the Mavs didn't have Luka, and partially because the Suns are just great in the fourth quarters. Zona, what do you think? What do you think happened this week besides the Luka being absent? Do you think that made a difference on those games?
Yeah, I think it did, but also the Suns are just in such a great groove right now. It's tough to see them, dropping these games. And they got Denver coming up with Jokic a little banged up too, so they definitely caught a break in the schedule. And I think they're, like good teams do, they take advantage of it and just stack up the wins. And I can't let you get past the 2-2 prediction last week. So I was on the show with PLR last week, and he said to make sure to give you some crap for that. So, I went 3-1. I thought they'd split the Dallas miniseries, but yeah, I mean, they're the best team in basketball when it comes to clutch time. They're in 22 minutes, they're plus 35, which is by far the best in the league. Shooting 65% from the field in those 22 minutes with 19 assists to 2 turnovers. So they just get the job done when it counts.
Damon, what do you think about those games this week?
Yeah, to Brandon's point that he was talking about in the intro, they kind of just have been coasting a bit through the first parts of games and then really turning it on in the fourth quarter. And frankly, they kind of look unstoppable when they get there. I'm not sure that there's a team that looks at what the Suns are doing in the fourth quarter lately and says we can match that, we can go toe-to-toe with that. So I think as long as that continues and the first few quarters kind of start to even out as well to reach sort of that happy medium between this outrageously effective fourth quarter play that they've had, then I think this team's going to be pretty well off.
It's just amazing how they seem to come together. We watched the first 3 quarters, and it's just crazy that we're watching and we're thinking, oh, they might sleepwalk their way to a loss tonight. They're not playing with extra oomph. Either the backups or the starters are not playing well, and it just seems like it's just gonna not be one of those nights. Then all of a sudden, the fourth quarter starts. CP3 locks in, Devin Booker locks in. Devin Booker's shooting almost 70% in clutch time this year. And all of a sudden, the Suns are just dominating the other team. They're doing it with defense. Right now, after all the games, 12-3, 15 games, they're third in the league in defense. During this 11-game winning streak, they're second on defense. They're only barely top 15 in offense. So you can see when the Suns are shooting, they're not shooting it as well as they otherwise could. Last spring, this same starting unit and most of the same bench, although I think the bench is better this year than last spring's bench, the Suns had the number one offense in the league from February on when they went on their great second half of the season run. And their defense was around 7th, 8th, 9th. Overall for the season, they were 6th or 7th in both. But during the big run when the Suns were great this past spring, they had a really better offense than they did defense. Now, during this 11-game win streak, they're really, really great on defense, and they're locking down even more in fourth quarters. And then their offense is just finally clicking because Chris Paul decides he's going to hit that midi, and Devin Booker gets to his spots. And Devin Booker's been making – here's the thing with Devin Booker, man. He's been making his open clutch three-pointers. He's been getting open ones, but he's making them when he's contested too. But he's making those three quarters when it counts. What else are you seeing in the fourth quarter, Zona?
Just Chris Paul just doing whatever the hell he wants, and everyone knows what's coming, and you can't stop it. I just laugh to myself sometimes just watching it because it's just like we kind of take it for granted in a way of how easy he gets to a spot and just pulls up and hits that mid range, and he's just been an assassin. And I think in general, the Suns, there have been some weaker opponents where it might be a little tough for them to be locked in for that full 48 minutes. But they step up when it counts, and that's what great teams do in the regular season. So that, and then the bench clicking a little bit. I think with Campaign missing some time early and Ayton missing some time, shifting the big rotation a little bit, that kind of weakened their depth and chemistry building. But now that they're getting some more reps, I think that you're going to see them continue to get better and better. So once that bench gets to that point where it was last year, where they're kind of at some points of the season carrying the starters, this team's going to be really, really good.
Yeah, Damon, what do you think about how the Mavericks played and whether missing Luka had anything to do with the outcomes this week?
Yeah, they just looked a lot like they were missing their alpha. You were getting good contributions from guys like Jalen Brunson and Frank Ntilikina, and even Porzingis for stretches, who gets probably too much flack for what he really deserves. But they just looked like a team that was without their multiple-time All-NBA guy.
No, absolutely. But, you would think that the multiple-time All-NBA guy and Luka Doncic, who obviously came out of the same draft as Deandre Ayton, which kind of leads into our next section when we get there, but we're not quite there yet, is that Luka would be the difference in beating the Suns. However, Luka is one win versus 1,000 losses against the Suns in his career. It doesn't matter who he's got on the court with him. It doesn't matter who the Suns are playing. The Suns, even in their 20-win season, in Ayton's rookie season, were beating the Mavericks. So I'm not sure that Luka made a difference on the wins. He might have just made a big difference on how the games unfolded. And it's interesting how those games did unfold. I thought the Mavericks played very, very well. They wanted to show that they could win without Luka, and they actually showed up very well for the first 3.5 quarters of each of those games. They had a lead going into the fourth quarter, 5-point lead going into the fourth quarter in both games. So I thought that was really good on their part. Kudos to them. But we all kind of knew all the way through the game. We knew the Suns were going to turn it on at some point. At some point, the Suns were going to go on a run. And that run happened in the fourth quarter of each game, exactly when Chris Paul wanted them to happen. So it's just amazing. Do you think Chris Paul is and should be in the MVP consideration in the conversation this year because of how he's playing or not? Damon, let's go with you first.
To be honest, if we're comparing it to last year, when did he come in 5th in MVP voting last season? Yeah, if we're comparing it to that, it definitely feels to me like he has more impact and more sway on how this team goes, as far as like if he's playing well, the rest of the team is playing well. And so I just think that if you're comparing it to last year, I think he should definitely be in the conversation. But to me, there's a lot of candidates elsewhere that are in the conversation now that weren't really in the conversation last year. Like you look at Jimmy Butler for Miami, wasn't in the top 5 last year, and he's probably going to be in the top 5 this year. So just as far as that.
Yeah, there's definitely a ton of worthy candidates for MVP, and obviously Steph Curry has just been shooting the leather off the ball this season. So I don't know that Chris Paul should be in the top of the MVP race, but 11 games in a row, you can't argue with that. Zona, what do you think?
Yeah, I think obviously 15 games into the season, Steph has it locked up at this point, but the season can change quick, so there's still a lot of time left. But yeah, I think Chris will probably be top 10, just with the Suns, probably being a top 2 seed in the West again. And if he continues to play like this, leading the league in assists and near the top in steals, and just helping these young guys out. So last year it was a lot like media narrative too that was like factored in. So maybe they got kind of tired of pushing that agenda this year, and Booker gets a little more love. But yeah, it's tough to see him not at least being discussed. I don't really see him as a legitimate candidate to win it, though.
Booker's been very interesting this year so far. I think in some ways he's playing better than he did last year. He's got a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio going into the last 2 Dallas games. He had been up over 5 assists a game and below 2.5 to 2 turnovers a game. And he only had 1 assist in the 2 Mavericks games put together, 0 on Wednesday and 1 on Friday. But otherwise, Devin Booker has been really, really good this year. He's making shots in the clutch. He's doing smart things. He's playing great defense. He had a block the other night to help seal the win. He had a steal last night, I think, to help seal the win. What do you think about Devin Booker's play so far this year, Zona?
Yeah, he's just doing what it takes to win, sacrificing a little bit some nights offensively, and he's had a couple shooting slumps too. But like when it comes to clutch time, he's locked in on both ends, and we've seen the chase down blocks like time and time again. And this one wasn't a chase down block last night, but just good straight up defense. And I think just seeing him sort of turn into the Olympic book where he's just sacrificing for the wins and sometimes turning into like a really good role player. I think that's the leap in his game that was so heavily criticized early on in his career. Like, this guy's not a winner. He doesn't do the little things, stuff like that. And just to see him transform and make big plays like that, in addition to the big scoring nights, it's just a luxury at this point. So I think playing with Chris obviously helps, but you got to give him a lot of credit too for just the little things he's improved on, and the decision-making, the rebounding, just literally just sacrificing his body on defense. And yes, he still has his lapses sometimes on that end, but for the most part, you can't get too nitpicky with someone with that big of a workload.
Yeah, absolutely. Damon, what are you seeing from Booker this year so far?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of that Olympic book kind of manifest itself here in Phoenix.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, with the hard defense that he's been playing, I haven't really seen him get in a stance the way he has been doing this year, especially in clutch time. And in addition to that, I think he's also just understanding even more the ebbs and flows of the game and just picking his spots even better about like, when should I be looking to score? When should I be looking to pass? When should I just be a decoy off ball? And I think that understanding is really helping the evolution of Booker kind of bring him into this potential all-NBA guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the evolution I'm seeing from Booker. He and CP3 are also in the top 5 in the league in assists per pass, which is pretty incredible considering CP holds the ball constantly. He's always bringing the ball up, and the Suns are a very pass-oriented offense. Although, I guess there's a chicken and the egg thing. Do you get the passes first to get the great shots? Do you need more passes to get great shots, or should you have the most assists per pass? The Suns are only in the 10 to 12 to 13 range in offensive rating. When their offense goes up to number one, I wonder if that means that's because they had more passes setting up good to great. Monty's talked last couple of years about good to great or paint to great on creating shots, and I haven't seen quite as much of that this year. There has been a lot of dribbling around and then a single pass getting the shot, a guy trying to break down the defender and then getting a shot or making a single pass. The other thing Monty talked about last night was the Suns are running themselves off the 3-point line, all besides Booker. Booker's 3-point attempts are up, but Mikal and Cam Johnson and guys like that are not being as aggressive on taking threes. They're driving in and trying to create a tougher shot for themselves. All those things are contributing to a not awesome offense so far, and but their defense has just been stellar, and it's really fun to watch. I should explain. A lot of people are asking is what the heck is wrong with Dave's setup here. I moved out of my office because my daughter moved into our house, and now I'm in another room and I haven't set it up yet. I'm currently negotiating with the boss on how much sun stuff I can put on the background of this room. So got to figure that out. But in the meantime, and I got the lighting problem here as well. So you guys are just going to have to, I'm in witness protection. Or so says Jay. We're both in prison. Me and Zona are both in prison because we got the dark background or the plain background.
I'm also in the middle of a move right now, so that's my excuse for being in witness protection right now.
Exactly. Damon's the one who's looking best out of all of us today. He's got great lighting and he's in a room that looks like it's lived in. So good for you.
It's all I live in. This is the only room I got.
Well, it's got good lighting, so we'll go with that. Yes. So last week, PLR was the winner in predicting the Suns going 4-0, although he didn't predict Luka wasn't going to play. But again, like I said earlier, Luka has almost never beaten the Suns in his career. So that still made PLR the rightest. I thought the Suns would have a couple of hiccups this week. I just didn't plan on them being absolutely perfect in every fourth quarter. They are setting themselves up to think they can play however they want to play the first three quarters and then assume they're going to win in the fourth. And some other team is going to just decide, no, we're going to make all of our shots in the fourth. So we'll see how that goes. At the end of the show, we'll preview the rest of the next week of games going through and after Thanksgiving. But for now, we are going to move on to hopefully the most interesting part of this show today. We are going to talk about Damon and I have gone back and forth in our Slack on Brightside writing, and I thought his takes were really good on whether Deandre Ayton is worth that max contract we all just assumed. Now, giving a quick recap. Well, first let's transition into the second quarter, courtesy of John Voida, who does a lot of our.
The second quarter.
So our second quarter is talking about whether Deandre Ayton is worth a max contract. What's his ceiling? What kind of player do we think he's going to be in the future? Because when you sign somebody to a new contract, you're paying them for the contract they're playing in, not for what they've already done. Some guys don't get paid until it's after they've already proven themselves. But when it comes to these rookie extensions, it's usually you're paying them on what's coming, what's to come. So let's go ahead and get into that. So we've got Deandre Ayton. He was not extended on his rookie deal. He is going to be a restricted free agent next summer. He is eligible for up to a max contract extension, which is $29.75 million a year, first year, with, if the Suns give the raises, the max raises up to 8% a year. And off that first year, 8% of that first year contract every year for 4 more years, and it can go up to 5 years, whereas another team can only do 4 years and 5% on raises. And so the Suns are they're rolling the dice on putting him into restricted free agency. James Jones went on record saying the Suns were not interested in just giving DA a max 5-year with escalators that could take it up to 30% of the cap or $33 million a year to start instead of 29. the Suns were not interested in that. Ayton's camp was not interested in anything lower than that. And so here we are. We're at a stalemate. Ayton's going into his 4th year in the league, and he's only the 4th number 1 overall pick not to get an extension the year before his 4th year. So what we're going to debate today is whether he is worth getting that max extension even next summer. It's too late now to negotiate it. We have to wait until next year. But what is it going to take? What do we need to see? What kind of player does he need to be to get that max extension and to earn it? And I'm going to let Damon go first on this and tell us what you think about DA's future.
Yeah, so I really loved Ayton's performance in the playoffs. Like, you're going to hear me talk pretty negatively about whether he deserves the max or not, but this is not a slight to what he did in the playoffs. This is not a slight to his defense, which is obviously fantastic. It's more about positional value for me in the NBA, and what can you get along the margins to kind of best set you up to build the team around whatever your cornerstones are. And right now the cornerstones of this team are, frankly, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Mikal Bridges more so than Deandre Ayton to me.
Zona?
Yeah, I think the whole discussion in terms of, like, is he worth, like, phrasing it like that. I mean, there's a lot of players that get max deals. Are they worth it? Probably not. Like, you look at, like, Rudy Gobert, for example, he's probably role-wise the most similar thing you could look at and sort of compare one-to-one with DeAndre. But and you look at the playoffs last year, and you tell me who you'd take out of Ayton and Gobert, with Rudy kind of struggling to stay on the court at times and getting exposed by the Clippers, small ball lineups, while Ayton was like an integral piece. Yeah, I totally get Damon's point about team building. There's ways you could find cheaper options at center, and when you have someone like Ayton who hasn't shown a lot offensively, creation-wise, there are definitely some concerns when you're going to pay someone, 30+% of your, salary or cap space. So, yeah, I do get the concerns, but it's never a case of, like, are they worth it? It's just what you got to pay to keep these guys on your team. Look at Michael Porter Jr. I would never in a million years give him that contract, but Denver had to keep him. And I think the Suns are going to end up in a similar boat where it's either, you got to look to move this guy or you got to extend him. There's no in between, because if you don't pay him, someone else will. And, I think, obviously Ayton's playoff performance was everything you wanted and more. So if he can continue to do that in the playoffs, then, you can kind of live with, like, the offensive limitations and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely a layered discussion that you have to factor in a lot of different things.
What I think polarizes people about DA, besides look, everyone talks about, oh, he doesn't dunk it hard enough. Oh, he doesn't put the ball on the ground. Absolutely. Those are true. But what really polarizes us on DA is the word max, I think. And really, when you think max contract, you think max player, and a max player should be the best player on your team. We don't talk about the fact that D'Angelo Russell has a max contract and Andrew Wiggins has a max contract. A lot of guys have these max contracts. So let's put the max in perspective. Let's put it into perspective of what I'd like to do is put it into perspective of where does DA rank in the league as a player, and should he get a salary that's commensurate with that ranking as a player? So if you take the word max off the table and just stop talking about it in those terms, and you talk about it in, should he make as much, if he's the 40th best player in the league, should he make as much as the 40th best player in the league makes? Should he? Is that fair, Damon?
I kind of have a tough time putting it next to guards and wings that way, just because the amount of super high level guards and wings that are worth 40th best player money it's a lot harder to get those guys than, like, how easy it is to find a big that can play well enough to meet that pay criteria.
What do you think is 40th best player money when you say that?
So I actually found this as part of my research. I found 41 players that are paid at least $25 million, and that's 41 including Blake Griffin, who of course is not on a contract that high at this point after his buyout and being with Brooklyn now.
All right. So what I did is I'm gonna share my screen, and I hope this works the way I want it to. Hold on here. Wait. I'm gonna show you guys the contracts that are out there for next year, and we're gonna look at the players because what I'd like to do is put this into terms of should he be paid along the lines of a top 40 player in the league. And I got to put it into a different screen. But anyway, I'll just keep talking while I'm doing this. I just don't like the term max. And and you talk, Damon, we're going to get into whether a center at all should be among the top 40 paid players in the league, period, because I think you're more into giving money to other positions. But if you want to rank Deandre Ayton as a player, you've got to, if you look at him in terms of the entire league, there was a dozen different lists of top 100 players coming into this season. Ayton ranked in between 37 and 50 of those. So if you put him a year from now, natural progression in the top 35, 40 of overall players in the league, then he should be paid commensurate. If his contract is up for a market rate contract, he should be paid equal to that contract. So I'm going to share my screen now. And we're going to go over who all next year is getting paid. So next year, this is the 2022 cap hit rankings, okay? This is everybody currently under contract for next year. This does not include anybody who's going to be obviously up for a contract that is not signed for next year. So anybody who's an unrestricted free agent or a restricted free agent next summer is not going to be in this list. Steph Curry is going to make $48 million. John Wall is not even playing this year. Is going to make $47 million. You go down here in this list, and all this is courtesy of Spot Track. Here you go. You see Devin Booker at 23rd in the league at $33.8 million. Then you go all the way down. You keep going, and you get to, oh, hey, all of a sudden we see Trae Young, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Michael Porter. They're 38, 39, and 40 in the league. So if Ayton gets paid that amount and he is the 40th best player in the league, then he should get paid that amount. So I don't want to talk about it in terms of max. I don't want to talk about it in terms of position that they play. I want to talk about it in terms of, is he a top player in the league, and should he be paid equivalent of a top player in the league? And I say yes. Zona, what do you think?
Yeah, I think one thing that is kind of like underlooked a little bit is obviously you can find production out of like these centers like on cheap contracts and all that, and they could help in the regular season with wins against, bad teams. Like we saw JaVale and Frank, torch Portland, who, their big man rotation and defense in general is pretty putrid. And then teams like Dallas, who their center rotation without Maxi Kleber is pretty rough too. So I think compartmentalizing regular season success with when you enter a playoff series, like you're going to need a defensive anchor. Those are tough to find. Like the grass is always greener, I think sometimes. And like, yes, you can find value and work your way through that. But, we just had a Kings podcaster on the other day who they have Richaun Holmes, who I love, big Richaun Holmes guy. And he's someone that would kind of fit that mold of like the cheaper center you could find to like replace an Ayton. And his first thing was like their number one, like not number one, but one of their top items on their wish list was to give Deandre a max offer sheet, this offseason. So I think you look around the league and, if Phoenix doesn't want him, there's gonna be a lot of teams that do, just because of his value defensively and what he brings as an anchor. And quite frankly, he's someone that could be like a playoff cheat code, like we've seen against a Golden State, who, with Draymond, like, are you going to be able to go the small ball like all the time? Because I don't know if he can, as great as Draymond is defensively, I don't know if he can really guard DeAndre on those hard rolls. So yeah, I think it's tough to, yes, there's value in that play, but it's also very hard to replace something like that. So that has to be factored in. And if you're going to move on from DeAndre, which by all means, James Jones definitely could, there, you can't rule anything out with him. He's very cutthroat. But if you're going to move on, you better have someone that can match that defensive anchor value to come into this team specifically. And looking post CP3 too, there's also concerns with shot creation. Where are the shots going to come from? So I get both sides of the coin, but like I said, grass is always greener sometimes. You're muted, Dave.
Oh no, sorry. Okay, David, what do you think about replacement value of Ayton? What is a type of player who you think could be just as effective for this team in the playoffs and carrying all the way to the finals? What kind of player could be just as effective for this team?
Well, so you kind of talk about if he's the 40th best player in the league, should he get paid the 40th highest contract? I think that kind of lends itself too much to letting teams who aren't making smart decisions influence your decisions too much. And like Brandon was saying, James Jones is capable of anything as we've seen. I think it's necessary to remind everybody that James Jones did not select Deandre Ayton. That was one draft before him.
He was the assistant though.
Yeah.
He was there. He just
Yeah.
wasn't the final guy.
Yeah. So I think that point is important. As far as replacement bigs being able to replace what Ayton does on either end, I had this tweet that kind of went negatively viral after Frank Kaminsky's 31-point game, I think it was, when the two centers, Kaminsky and JaVale McGee, combined for like 45 points, 20 rebounds,
15.
bunch of stuff like that. Yeah, and from two guys who are making a combined just over $7 million, as opposed to if Ayton were to sign a max, that's
So let's talk about
$30
that.
million mark.
Let's talk about that. Those guys, how many times were those guys triple teamed? How many times did the defense rotate down to tag or try to swipe at the ball or try to defend the lob on those guys from the corners to help out the guy in the middle? I would say about roughly zero times. Here's the thing. JaVale McGee and Frank Kaminsky can look good in a pinch and in a regular season game. But even Frank and JaVale would tell you that they shouldn't be playing ahead of DA. That's so as far as replacement value, I fear that your replacement value of DA, this is just my opinion. You can have yours, Damon. You can have yours, Zona. You can have yours in the chat. My opinion, though, is you don't win championships with a 50 to 75% replacement level player. You just don't. You win championships with the guy who is better than the other guys when it counts. And DeAndre Ayton has shown he's better when it counts, and he's better even in the regular season. I asked Monty Williams the other day pregame, Wednesday before the Mavs game. I said about that game, Damon. I said you had Frank and JaVale play really, really well. They had 45 points and 15 rebounds in one game. But then as soon as DeAndre Ayton was healthy, you brought him in for every minute he could play. And because Monty had already said he was going to hold Ayton to 27, 28 minutes, but then Ayton was looking so good, he kept him out for 34, 35 minutes or 33, 34 minutes in the Monday game. And he's like, Dave, I don't know how to put this in a clearer way, but from end to end, from rim to rim, DA is the guy. He just is. He's just better for this team out there. And he tried to say it in a way that was not negative to Frank and JaVale. But, I mean, it was like almost saying, why aren't you playing Landry Shamet because he made 4 threes last night instead of Devin Booker? The way Monty answered the question was, you just don't. So I think it's pretty obvious that DA is the better player and the guy you want out there all the time, because Monty was saying he just does everything better. Yeah, he doesn't make the passes like Frank can make. He doesn't finish an off balance lob the way JaVale can do, but he does all these things so much better, and that's the guy you need to have on the court. That to me is, no, you can't win in the playoffs and go to the finals with JaVale McGee and Frank Kaminsky at center. And I get what you're saying, Damon. In that one game, sure, they looked great. But also, the team they were playing against wasn't trying to stop JaVale McGee or Frank Kaminsky. In fact, that was against Portland. And after the game, CJ McCollum said, man, you can't let Frank get 30 points. You just can't do that. But it was after the game that he said it. They didn't have a plan for stopping him during the game because they kept thinking he was going to stop himself. And 2 games later, most of Frank's points in that game were on like floaters and one-handed jump stop shots. He missed every one of them the 2 games later. And so nothing against Frank. I love Frank, but he's not the guy you're going to want to play against in place of DA. Now, are there other guys who could be almost as effective as DA with a lesser contract because, like a Richaun Holmes or whatever? But even as Brandon said, as Zona said, the Kings podcaster said he'd much rather have DA on a max contract than Richaun Holmes on $11 million. So sometimes the grass is not always greener on the other side. What other comments on DA do you guys want to make?
Just in response to all that, if that's okay, Brandon.
Sure.
The point I was trying to make wasn't about Kaminsky and McGee specifically, but like the idea of the lower tier contract bigs being able to impact the game to an amount that's significant enough for it to have value. Like I'm not looking at Frank Kaminsky and JaVale McGee. I'm looking at like a contract, for example, like Robert Williams just signed an extension with Boston for 4 years, $54 million. I think that Robert Williams in this team would provide a solid enough positive value to make up for what you're losing from DA, because I think Robert Williams can distribute the ball really well, run the rim really well, run pick and roll really well, and just plays his butt off on defense, which is a lot of the same things that Ayton does, but it's also at that lower price point that really gives you the flexibility to make other moves around that point. And I think that depth is really underrated as far as on contenders.
Zona?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's definitely value you could find throughout the league, but when it comes to replacing like a starter, the first thing I wouldn't do, unless we're talking about post CP3, which I think is something a lot of Suns fans don't want to talk about because it's a hard conversation, but they will need another shot creator. And I don't know if Mikal Bridges is going to be that guy. Right now, Deandre doesn't look like that guy. So that leaves you to the question, who's the easiest to trade? And it's probably Deandre, just because of where he's at right now. But yeah, I think when looking at trying to find that value, though, on a title contender, I think you shouldn't try to cut corners or save money here or there. Like, I'd pay DeAndre and go from there. And if you need to make adjustments later on and things like, they have a specific need they need to fill, then that's fine. But I just think trying to get too smart or too cute with something that's working could definitely backfire. So I think there's risk involved. I definitely get where Damon's coming from. He's made some great points. But for me, it's like, keep this title contender together and then figure out the rest later. And it's not like DeAndre is going to be an untradeable contract, or like Mikal Bridges his contract looks incredible too. So, to me, it's like you already have these like values locked up. So I would just keep it together and just go from there.
Yeah, going into Robert Williams a little bit. And again, Damon, we're just having a good debate here. Okay, we're going back and forth. Robert Williams this year, I just pulled him up. He is averaging 30 points a game, 30 minutes per game. 31 minutes per game after last year averaging 18.9 in 52 of their 72 games. He's played 31 minutes per game this year. He's averaging 10 points, 9 rebounds, 1.4 assists, 1.8 blocks. He's getting 2 free throws a game, and he's getting 6 shots a game. So he is doing very well. And at the apex, in the best version of Robert Williams, you can get a really good player. Here's the thing, though. Robert Williams has never proven that he is a really good player when you need him the most. He gets in foul trouble in the playoffs. He gets injured in the playoffs. He has not shown that he is reliable. And I'd rather have Ayton on a max contract that I know is reliable, that has proven he can be there every game of the playoffs for you, doesn't foul out, he does everything he does is to stay on the court. And Monty Williams needs him on the court because he wants to be able to do that versatile defense as well as offense. That I wouldn't trust my future. I wouldn't trust my future with Robert Williams as the center. I guarantee you that Boston would pay Ayton the max if they had the capacity to do that, and rather than keeping Robert Williams. I'm not entirely sure that, so I won't say guarantee, but I would pretty much guarantee most teams in the league would have Ayton on a max than the center that they have. There's maybe 6 or 8 teams in the league who are happy with the center they've already got. And guess what they're doing with that center? They're paying him the max. So that's the other thing is how many guys in the league, would you put Robert Williams on an island against Giannis? Would you have him defend Giannis in space?
No.
I don't think anyone can.
Who would have?
Not even
who would the
Ayton
Suns
did.
have put on Giannis then? How would you have defended Giannis in the finals last year if Robert Williams was in Ayton's place?
I think Crowder and Williams probably would have split time.
Crowder and Robert Williams. Do you think they would have done as I mean, obviously Giannis did great, but he played like one of the greatest players in the history of the league. I think being able to put DA on that island, it was great. And what would have happened is they would have had to do a lot of mixing and matching and rolling and tagging and double teaming and trapping and all that stuff against Giannis. And that just would have broken down the rest of the defense in ways you don't want to have your defense break down. One of the things that's great about the Suns defense is that they don't have to double team guys. When was the last time you saw the Suns go out of their way to double team a player? Any player, no matter who the player is. They just switched.
It was Giannis.
They didn't really double team him though in the finals. Did they double team him in the finals?
They helped a lot, I think.
Yeah, they overhelped a little bit. I want to say double team, but they definitely changed. They adjusted their defensive scheme. It was a little more like paint central. But one point I think is a better point to make, Dave, than the Giannis thing is we're in the same conference as Nikola Jokic, and that Denver team's going nowhere. Like I think Phoenix and Denver long term are probably like 2 of the safest bets in the West to have those future playoff battles. And having someone like Deandre to guard Nikola Jokic, who no one can really guard Nikola Jokic. And Nikola's already said multiple times that Deandre gives him the most trouble he's ever had. I think that point is more important than something like Giannis or even Embiid, who these are Eastern Conference teams. You're probably not going to play them again unless you're in the finals. So I think in the playoffs going up against Jokic or even Anthony Davis or Towns, who might not make the playoffs in Minnesota, he might need to go somewhere else. But having Deandre to guard Jokic specifically, who, like I said, Denver, they're a very good team. I know obviously the Suns swept them, but they're going to get Murray back, Porter Jr., and at full strength. That's a team that is going to cause trouble. So I think, having a Jokic stopper or like not stopper, just someone that could slow him down because no one can stop Jokic, but is pretty valuable. So that to me is like one area that I think DeAndre gets overlooked in. And then, like I said earlier, just going back to the Golden State point, I think dating back to when the Suns first drafted Ayton, I was pretty high on his defense, and I thought that his ability not to get played off the court defensively would help against a team like Golden State specifically. And we're going to see that a few times this season, in the regular season, and obviously on Christmas Day. So I think if DeAndre can kind of expose Golden State's small ball lineups and stay on the court against them, then that's another huge point that I think could kind of turn the tide.
Yeah, it's interesting. They'll play Golden State 3 times in the next month. Golden State right now is the only team that has a better record than the Suns. The Suns overall are going to start playing tougher teams over the next month. They've had a fairly easy schedule so far. So we'll see. We'll see then how the next month goes. But I think that's a very good point, Zona, is that DA is the kind of guy who you can leave on the court even when Golden State is going small, like with Draymond in the middle. And that's basically how they've done it. But I also want to remind people that Golden State is the team that everyone says, look at them. They can play small. You don't need a center. They had 4 Hall of Famers in their prime on their team at the time. And the only position they didn't have a Hall of Famer at was at center. And so, yeah, you give me 4 Hall of Famers at the other positions, then I'm okay with not having a great center. But almost every other team in the league that is going to a finals level as a contender has a really great center on their team. And there's a reason DA is only around 8th or 10th among centers, and he still is about the 40th best player in the league. I mean, the centers are not being played off the floor, and the centers are not being phased out of the NBA like people thought they were going to be. So I think this is a good discussion. Thank you, Damon, for having that and playing that part. I know you believe it. And I believe what I believe, and it's just that's why NBA is so great to follow as fans. And obviously, I mean, it's pretty safe to say that the Suns front office is more closer to Damon's side of the fence than mine because they didn't give DA that max. I every time I talk to one of the folks outside of our network, outside of our market, they're all just shocked that the Suns did not give Ayton the max. David Bailey, I wish Dave would acknowledge that giving Ayton the max would sap all that depth that we have now, especially once Cam Johnson is off his rookie deal. That's not actually true, David. The Suns will have all the capacity to do maxes. They can't obviously keep 3 max players. They can't keep paying CP3 $30-some million and Devin Booker and all that. They are going to have to reconstitute the team a little bit, but you're always going to be able to get depth. You're always going to be able to find those guys like JaVale McGee, like Frank Kaminsky, like Landry Shamet, who they acquired for $3 million. They extended him at 10. Landry Shamet's the one that bothers me more than DA at a max. They got a good deal on Mikal Bridges. They will be able to keep that depth. And they will be able to keep a championship level team together with DA on a max. That doesn't at all mean if you sign DA to the max, you can't have the rest of a team together.
I would just like to say on Shamet, it's important to remind ourselves that's really just a 2-year, $20 million contract. That's very tradable too. So I think obviously it is kind of weird that they extended him before seeing him in their system and someone that's going to be a backup for Book, like strictly. But I think, that I had to remind myself that because early in the season, especially when he was not really a huge and a big part of their plans, I was kind of thinking about that extension again. And then I remembered it's just a hidden 2-year, $20 million. It just looks a little bit bigger on the surface.
Yeah. And really the Suns are geared up for the next 2 years. So you've got, no matter what, if you extend your own players, you can pay them. If you keep your own players, you can pay them over and above the cap, and that's all well and good. It's the reconstituting the team, signing free agents that you'll be limited on, but the Suns will still have mid-level exceptions and biannual exceptions and minimum contract exceptions and all that. They'll still be able to fill out a team the same way they filled out the last 2 years. They've basically built this team for the next 2 years with CP3, and Landry Shamet fits in that. So you're right, Zona, that after 2 years they'll have a little bit of a different team. But man, I believe in James Jones, the team builder. Just 2 years ago, this was a 20-win team, and he turned him into a finals team. So I believe in that. I believe in his ability to do it. And if it's James Jones who truly believes Ayton should not be paid the max, that's fine. I don't think it is. I think it's Robert Sarver who decided that James Jones shouldn't be, that DA should not be a max player, and James Jones wasn't given a choice. That's my opinion. I don't know for a fact. And if that's the case, I think they made their own decision. James Jones does know how to build a team. He knows how to do it with keeping players on track and focused and committed while negotiating deals. Now, one thing that has gone under the radar is that the Suns were potentially very close to not having completed the Mikal deal this offseason. Mikal took a discount to sign, and they waited until Mikal just decided he was going to sign. Everybody thought Mikal was going to get 95 to 100. Some people thought he was going to get even more than that. And if he held out till next summer, he could have gotten more than that. A lot of people think Mikal is more valuable on the Suns than Ayton. So why did he sign for only $21 million a year? Because he took a deal. The Suns hardballed him, and he took the deal. CP3 probably did not want to have two almost totally unguaranteed contracts in his final 2 years, but he took it because he wanted to stay. There's a lot of guys who take the deal, and DA was the one who didn't. And the Suns were in danger of not even getting Mikal under contract. And how much would be melting down right now if neither of them had been signed? So we'll see what happens with DA. And this season is going to play out. I think he's going to end up showing more this year even than last year. And all this is going to be water under the bridge, but we'll see. That doesn't mean Robert Sarver will see the light. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so that was our second quarter. Thank you guys for contributing to that debate. I don't think we have a winner. I think everybody stayed in the exact corner they came in. So let's move on to baller talk.
Hey, Dave, real quick,
yeah.
Is it okay if I butt in with one more thing on that?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay,
so that list that I was mentioning earlier, the list of 40 players who make 25 million or more this season, excuse me. 8 of the 40 are bigs, or you can argue that they're bigs. And just going to read them off real quick. Al Horford, Bam Adebayo, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Karl Anthony Towns, Kristaps Porzingis, Rudy Gobert, and Anthony Davis. Ayton has a lower usage than all except Gobert and a lower percentage of unassisted made shots than all of them. So taking that what it's worth.
Yeah, I understand. You're in the camp that a player making 25 or more $1 million a year creates their own offense. I'm in the camp that of more of a Rudy Gobert type. In fact, I think he's better than Rudy Gobert in that you've got it. That if you can put a guy out there who can defend every one of those dudes you just mentioned, and can switch out and defend Damian Lillard on the wing, and any of the other great players that are out there, and can rebound like a mad dog. People are saying Miles Turner could be a good replacement. Well, Miles Turner makes a lot of money too, not quite the 25 plus, but he doesn't rebound, he doesn't stay healthy, and he doesn't have any more of an offensive game than DA does. I don't know. Indiana's not even happy with Miles Turner. Why would we be? So I think it's just to me, I value different things than just the ability to create your own offense. And that's this is a win games league. It's not a create your offense league. If this was a one-on-one league, Ayton shouldn't be out there. But it's not a one-on-one league. It's a 5-on-5 league. And the teams that win games are the ones who move on. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I will say he does need to show a lot more offensively. For me, like, obviously the defense is like exactly what you want, and you're kind of hoping he grows into that offensively, but there needs to be more consistent, either getting to the line, attacking off the dribble, nothing crazy. Like, he doesn't have to bring the ball up the court like Giannis or anything, but just those hard dribble moves and just like initiating contact, stuff like that. And I think obviously he's still 23. There's still a lot of time for him to add some stuff to his game. And he's been asked to play a role that's not really suited for him to like showcase those things. But if you're going to pay him max money, I do think there needs to be some improvements on that end for sure.
All right, we are going to move into our third quarter. What I'm going to do right now, though, as a little bit of a break, give everybody a chance to drink some water or whatever it is. We are not going to play a Manscaped ad because we no longer have a relationship with Manscaped. So you're welcome, folks. You don't have to listen to me talk about trimming ourselves or asking Damon uncomfortable questions. So for this moment, for a little bit of a break, we're gonna remind you that you can sign up for this podcast in audio form and any of your forms that you want to sign up for, so you can listen to our midweek episodes as well. So I'm going to play that first. For those watching this episode on YouTube, I've got some news for you. You're only getting half the story. The Solar Panel Podcast delivers you an additional special episode every Wednesday with a national personality from places like The Ringer, The Athletic, Bleacher Report, Sports Illustrated, ESPN, NBA.com, and everyone else. You'll hear what the non-locals think about the Suns and the NBA in general. It's a new feed, though. You've got to click some buttons. Forget the old one. Get the new one. Go to your favorite pod app, search for Solar Panel Podcast with the orange logo. While you're there, subscribe, rate, and review. And if you leave me a 5-star review, I'll give you props on the air. All right, folks, please, I will put the link in the chat at the end of the show for you to click over there and subscribe to the audio feed. We have a lot of great episodes. We've been doing previews for the games that are coming up midweek, and I had a great talk with Tim Cato this week, who has covered the Mavs for the past 10 years, just about the overall drama, the difference in the Mark Cuban allegations that came out a few years ago versus the Robert Sarver allegations that are out now. The Lucas stuff, DA stuff, all the drama around whether Jason Kidd is a good coach and is better than Rick Carlisle or not, all that kind of stuff. And we talked about the Suns and how somebody outside the Phoenix market thinks about the Phoenix Suns. So it was a really good talk. So go ahead and sign up. I'll give you the link toward the end of the show. All right, we are going to move into baller talk. The first question I don't think that we covered last week that was left by Liz Nichols. But if we did cover it, we'll go back to it anyway. Liz was worried that the team would fall apart when DA comes back. I know we talked about it a little bit with PLR, but obviously the team did not fall apart when DA came back this week. They played just like they always have played, basically, that we're used to over the past couple of weeks. Frank Kaminsky came up with a sore knee this week anyway and didn't get a chance to play. What do you guys think of? I'm going to turn this a little bit, and I'm going to say, what do you guys think of JaVale McGee so far? What do you think about the minutes that JaVale has played? Should he be in a bigger role, or is this a perfect role? What is it that he brings to the team that we didn't have before? Zona, you go first.
It is a roller coaster ride that has a lot of highs and lows. But he's been pretty productive and done about a little bit better than what I thought he'd do. I think the role he's in is perfect right now. Obviously, in the playoffs, there's going to be some teams that he's going to struggle to get on the floor against consistently. So I still think their biggest need is finding that small ball five, like a Torrey Craig, for specific matchups. But against traditional centers and drop coverages, I think he does a great job in protecting the rim. But just the perimeter stuff is the only thing I would just highlight is kind of that weakness. Outside of that, he's done everything you want and more from a backup center. And, he'll have a, 2-to-1 ratio of great plays to Shaq into full type plays. But, overall, I've been impressed. And I think, just kudos to him and Frank for stepping up when they needed him most.
Damon, what do you think about JaVale?
Yeah, Brandon talked about the highs and lows, and they're really high and they're really low with McGee. I really like, just as a team building philosophy, being able to keep not much change in style between your first string center and your second string center. I like that they kind of play the same way. I called it McGee and Cam Payne the best reserve pick and roll duo in the league the other day, and I think that they're better than a lot of starting pick and roll duos as well. So just to get such prolific work out of a backup is, I think, pretty admirable.
Yeah, and the energy is definitely something I want to touch on too. Just, there's times last year where outside of campaign, they would kind of lack that hype man or someone to get the crowd going, and JaVale's always, doing that. And I think that's an important thing that kind of gets overlooked sometimes, because just that injection of life in a game can really turn things around. A hard dunk, blocking the ball 10 seats back in the stands, stuff like that.
Yeah, what I'm looking forward to with JaVale is that DA will watch him over the course of the season, and he'll pick up some of JaVale's tricks. And when I say tricks, I mean CP's been telling DA to roll hard all the way to the rim every time, and DA is inconsistent in that. If he sees that the defense is already sagging, he'll stop short of a full roll, and then CP is kind of stuck trying to create a mid-range shot when all the defenders are right there because DA hasn't rolled all the way to the rim. McGee is so good at just presenting himself at the rim as quickly as possible as soon as he's set the screen and Chris Paul snaked around it or Devin Booker snaked, whoever's got the ball. McGee goes straight to the rim as fast as he can. And he just sits there and he forces, he gives you an option to finish, and he's always ready to jump and finish with a dunk. And DA needs a little bit of got to see it first and then do it. And I think it really helps, as you said, Damon, it helps having the same style of guy offensively and what the Suns want in the second unit as with DA, so that he can see it happen. Because I don't know that he learned how to roll from Dario. Dario wouldn't have shown him how to roll great. Frank shows him how to do a stop, do the short roll and stop mid range and then try to pass it out, which DA isn't great at passing out on speed on a roll. So I think JaVale is a good guy to watch. And DA learns by seeing, it seems like, and being shown how to do it rather than just being told. And I do feel like this will be a great opportunity for DA in the second half of the season to show a little bit more consistency on the roll, even when the defense is starting to sag, because he can jump over top of them. I do find it interesting, though, that the defense plays against DA totally different. Mike Vigil, Protected Pick on Twitter, made this comment, and I thought it was spot on, that teams are extremely consistent when DA is in the game. They are going to have their guard or whoever's guarding our corner guys, because we always have a guy in each corner, Mikal and Jay or whoever it is, standing in each corner for the 3-point shot and pulling the defense out, while Chris Paul and DA are in the middle trying to do a pick and roll. And every time one or both guys, defenders on the baseline, slide in, drop in to defend either the lob or DA's drive or whatever it is, to discourage DA from finishing that roll every single time. The defense does not do the same thing when JaVale's in the game, because that's a backup unit themselves, and they're not really focused on stopping JaVale on the roll. And so the Suns have to figure out a counter to defenses doing that. And what they've started doing this past week is they don't as often put guys in both corners. They're pulling one of the corners, they're leaving one of the corners open, empty. So then there's a little bit more room, for DA to get to the rim without a guard tagging him down low or trying to stop the lob. But the Suns are going to have to do some things, because they've gotten a little bit predictable. Although, what does predictable mean? Predictable means you've got DA triple teamed in the paint, and Chris Paul and Devin Booker have open mid-range shots which they love to take. So it all depends on there's always counters to every defense, and the Suns are just going to have to find a little bit different counter to be able to get DA that lob on the roll that he can finish. He doesn't finish the same way JaVale was, or learning how to finish the way JaVale does would be good too. Okay, there was a question earlier on. I'm not sure if I can find it again, but it said, if DA had been given this extension, I think it was by Buck Dog already, would we be happy with how DA is playing this year? Damon?
No, not even a little bit. He has been a shell of the playoff Ayton, and I am not sure what the cause for that is. It's probably just all the off-court stuff, like the contract and the Sarver stuff. But he just seems like there's a lot more lapses than there were at any point in the playoffs. Kind of reverting back to that regular season Ayton. And if playoff Ayton is warranting the max, then we need to see playoff Ayton more in the regular season as well, I think.
But a question for you is, when the Suns are winning 11 games in a row and regular season Ayton, the Suns had 51 wins last year, second most in the league, in 72 games. They're winning 11 games in a row here. Do you really need playoff 8 and 82 games?
Well, he hasn't been around for the whole 11 games, right?
No, he hasn't, but the Suns haven't missed a beat when he has been in there. So I'm just saying, do you really need him to be that top end? They do need Chris Paul to be that top end player. They do need Devin Booker. I'm only asking the question. I'm not saying he doesn't need to be. But yeah, that's a good point. Zona, what do you think?
Yeah, he's not playing like a max player right now, but he's also dealt with injury and obviously all the outside distractions. So I think offensively there just needs to be a little more consistency. Defensively, I think he's mostly been fine. There have been lapses, energy lapses with the whole team too. So it's not just him. I think even during this 11-game win streak, there's been I feel like maybe I'm crazy for thinking this, but they've only looked good in maybe 20% of it, or as good as I think they can be. So it just feels like, the team in general just had these lapses of mental focus. So yeah, overall, there's still a lot of season left. And I think once they get in that rhythm and get, the team flowing and everyone healthy, they're going to hit that stride where they're going to look a lot different. Yeah, right now, Ayton definitely needs to prove it a little bit more, I think, consistently. But yeah, it's still early in the season.
So Rao made a comment. Dave, you're making the point that Ayton is not worth the max. You haven't been listening to me. So your point might be, and other people's points might be, that a max player creates his own shot and plays at top 100% speed all the time. Absolutely. My point is that if Ayton is a top 40 player in the league, he should be paid like a top 40 player in the league. That just happens to be max contract range. So he should be paid like it. And he was one of the most valuable players in the playoffs when you need him the most. He should be paid like it. That's my point. You guys are missing my point when you say that I'm making your point for you. I'm not. And Long John Silver, the only reason, this is hilarious to me. This makes me, I don't understand the thinking on this. The only reason you want to have the max is because of his playoff performance. Yes, I want to pay a guy who leads you to the finals and plays his best basketball in the playoffs. I don't want to pay a guy who scores 30 points in an early season game and then doesn't show up in the playoffs. I don't understand you people. Why do you want to discount his playoff performance so much that you say he's only good in the play? He was great in the playoffs, and he led the team to the thing you want a team to do, is win in the playoffs. I think it's ridiculous to make this argument that he has to be better in the regular season or as good in the regular season as he is in the playoffs. I just want the great player in the playoffs. That's what I want. Give that to me. I'll pay him commensurate with his level of player in the league. End of story. Jesus, people. Good Lord. Why are we focused on the November games more than playoff games?
Fired up.
Good Lord.
Yeah,
wow.
It's kind of goes to the whole point of, when you want a player to show up, if they show up, then, when it counts, that's kind of all that matters. For me, if DeAndre plays like that every postseason, he's worth the max. I don't care if he sleepwalks through the regular season, honestly, which may be a little naive to say, but that is what matters. And obviously you want more flashes in the regular season, but it's still just a regular season. This team's a machine. They're on an 11-game win streak. They're probably going to finish, top 3 in the West. So, I think right now, in a way, it feels like there's a lot of Suns fans that are just we're so used to being miserable or creating problems that we're going out of our way to find some instead of just enjoying this team. And I think that's part of the whole DA thing, but also it's a lot of money to give out, and it could limit the team in the future. So I understand certain points of it, but it's just getting some of the points being made are a little bit out there, I think.
Well, I think people are just getting too focused on this. They're forgetting this is November and not June. That's all. That's my point. Roy Hibbert, code JJM. Roy Hibbert was a great playoff player. Was he? Was he a playoffs MVP? Did he lead a team to the finals? No. So stop it. Jesus. Anyway.
If if it's okay to just play devil's advocate for a second.
It's always okay. Just you incite my wrath, but that's all right. Go right ahead.
I think that a lot of the trouble people might be having, and myself included, with this point to a little bit extent, but I think the sample size thing matters just as far as like we have one sample size of, what was it, 15 to 20 games in the playoffs as opposed to like 3 full seasons and a little bit into his 4th. I think if there was a second playoffs at any point, like in the bubble year, for example, if there was a second playoffs and we had seen that, oh, he really consistently every year will turn it on at this time of year, I think that would sway some people, but I just think it's small sample size is giving people a tough time.
But it's the sample size. It's the sample size that you want. Playoffs, by definition, is small sample size because it's do or die. And guess what? He got 22 games of playoffs in his first, and that's the biggest sample size of any 22-year-old lead center in history, because no team makes the finals with a 22-year-old lead at the center at the lead. Come on, guys. Let's stop focusing on sample size and stop focusing on regular season being more important. That's why Andrew Wiggins has a max contract. That's why D'Angelo Russell has a max contract. That's why a lot of these guys have max contracts, because we focus on the wrong things. Does he look pretty making a shot in November? Max. That's just BS. It's total BS. All right, guys. What other questions, ballers, do you want me to answer? Do you want any of us to answer? Yeah, I guess Booker needs more of a playoff sample size. Booker was paid based on regular season performance. He did show up in the playoffs, thank God. He is great in the playoffs. We always thought he would be great in the playoffs. But there are guys, I want to point out something. Karl Anthony Towns was age 22 in his first playoffs. He had Jimmy Butler. He had Tom Thibodeau. How did Karl Anthony Towns do in the playoffs? Should we ever hold that against him? Does anybody know how he did in the playoffs? If you don't know, I'll tell you. Karl Anthony Towns that year is age 22. He was age 22 season. In the regular season, he was great. 22 points, 12 rebounds, 23 points, 12 rebounds. Wonderful. He helped Minnesota get to the playoffs. They won 50-plus games that year with Jimmy Butler as one of their lead guys. And they got in the first round. They lost in 5 games. What did Karl Anthony Towns do in the playoffs? Worse than he did in the regular season. But it was only 5 games, so should we not hold it against him?
What team was that against, that series?
I don't remember. Maybe it might have been Golden State.
I personally don't think any team should get flagged for losing in 5 to that Golden State era team.
No, but what I'm pointing out is that Karl Anthony Towns was worse in the playoffs than he was in the regular season. So I guess that's the league we play in. That's the league we're covering, is we pay people for the large majority, which is the regular season, and we don't hold their playoffs against them. One of the guys in the chat said we don't pay people based on playoff performance. I think that's sad, but that's just me. I'd rather pay them based on playoff performance. All right, let's predict. Let's go into previewing the next week of games. I am out of town next Saturday, so we're not going to be able to record next Saturday morning. We might record Sunday. I haven't talked to Brandon or Zona about this yet. So, but I am out of town, and so we're going to go over the next 5 games for the Suns. We're going to start our 4th quarter here. Let me do this.
The 4th quarter.
All right, I'm not great on transitions yet today, but that's all right. So previewing the upcoming games for the Suns. They host the Nuggets on Sunday night. Then they go on a road trip. They're at the Spurs, who have not been that great this year. They're at the Cavs, who just lost Evan Mobley for a few weeks, at least a few weeks, 2 to 4 weeks. So I don't know if they're going to continue to be great. They've already lost not Darius Garland, but the other guard.
Sexton?
Yes, Sexton, also to an injury. So the Cavs may have peaked this year. Then they play the Knicks, who have not been as good this year, at least offensively, as they were a year ago. And then they are at the Nets on Saturday. That's 5 games. One home against the Nuggets, who they already lost to this year after sweeping them in the playoffs last year. And then at the Spurs, at the Cavs, at the Knicks, and at the Nets. Brandon, how do you think they're going to do? And what are you looking for from the Suns this coming week?
I'm going to go 4-1 this time. And, obviously I'd love for them to go 5-0 and keep the win streak rolling, but I feel like they're going to lose one of those weird games like the Spurs or Cavs where they just kind of do the same like sleepwalking routine and it comes back to bite them in the ass. So hopefully I'm wrong. I would love for this win streak to keep rolling, but I think 4-1 is still pretty damn optimistic. A lot more optimistic than your 2-2 pick last week. So I think they're going to keep rolling. I think just showing more engagement throughout the game is probably the most important thing for me. Getting those reps in with the second unit. If they can start to click even more, I think that's probably the major key. And hopefully we could have some more blowouts to get these guys some rest in the fourth quarter. And it's kind of funny that the game last night, a minute left, they unload the bench in a 10-point game, and you saw Booker get up at one point because he was so frustrated with how things are rolling. So
CP was at the scorer's table, I think.
Yeah, no. After that turnover, Book got up, threw his shorts off or warm-up pants off, and he was like, "Put me in, coach."
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
I think
throw
his shorts off. That would have been bad.
So no, getting some more rest to the starters, I think, like during like blowout games, is something that I think we'll start to see more frequently, especially as things start to even out and the bad teams kind of remember that they're bad and the Suns start clicking. Because there's always a weird stuff that happens early on in the season, and hopefully there'll be some more blowouts to come.
All right, Zona's got us at 4-1 over the next week, plus over the next 8 days. What do you think, Damon?
I'll go 5-0. Let's just root on this streak to keep going. I see Brandon's point about they might sleepwalk through either the Spurs or the Cavs game, but overall, I think some solid injury luck throughout the week for the Suns. So I'm going 5-0 streak. We're going streaking.
Jamal Murray.
We're going streaking.
We go in 5.
Yeah.
Wow. If they went 5-0, then they would have a 16-game winning streak, which would be the second longest in team history. They once had a 17-game winning streak in the 06-07 season, which was what's even more hilarious than that is that they followed it up almost immediately with a 15-game winning streak. They ended up winning 33 out of 36 games in the middle of that season when they went 61-21 in the 06-07 season. That is just, it's just incredible. It's just incredible. So you guys, okay, so we got a 4-1 and a 5-0. You guys know I'm usually the negative guy, I guess. I think they're gonna avenge their loss to the Nuggets. They're gonna beat the Nuggets on Sunday. I think they're going to beat the Spurs just because the Spurs are just shorthanded. They just don't have as good a team. And the Suns are going to beat the Spurs the same way they beat these teams in the past week. And the Cavs are going to beat the Cavs just because the Cavs have lost a bunch of players. They don't have the horsepower that they had. The Knicks and the Nets are going to be tough. They'll have been on the road for a few days. They're going through Thanksgiving. They're going to be missing families. I feel like they're going to drop one of those two between the Knicks and the Nets. I don't think they'll drop both. I think they're going to drop one of the two. So I guess what I'm saying is then they're going to end up with a 14-game winning streak or a 15-game winning streak and then get stopped at that point. So yeah, I'll say they'll go 4-1 over the next week. So we'll see how that goes. What do you guys think in the chat? I've seen a few people. So says Jay says they're going to go 79-3 on the year, which, hey, that's a 78-game winning streak. That's great. All the way through the playoffs. Pretty nice. The big Warthog says they think they're going to lose. He thinks they're going to lose to the Nets. Cavs will win. Redshift Galaxy says the Cavs are going to win a game. Any team could win any of the games. What I put up on the screen is Rao said they'll win all the games, but Ayton will be MVP in none of them. Here's what I'm going to predict. Ayton's going to be the best player on the court at least one of these games. That's my prediction for the week. They're going to go 4-1, and Ayton's going to be the best player in at least one of them. All right, so there we go. Charles says they're going to end up with a 20-win streak after all is said and done. Let's go for that. That'd be nice to see. Okay, we're going to wrap up the show. Thank you guys so much for being on here. Wow, it's been an hour and 20 minutes already. Time flies when we're having fun. I want to remind folks about we have this fundraiser that I've done for 5 years now on Brightside. We're going to be talking about it on Solar Panel as well. I want you guys to go to the link that I'm going to put in the chat here and donate. We're donating tickets this year to first responders and healthcare workers that really kept us going during the pandemic, put their lives on the line even more than usual, more frequently than usual because of the pandemic over this past couple of years. So I want you guys to make the donation here. Donate some tickets. They're only $11 a piece. If you donate more than one ticket, you can get something for yourself as well. So go on that site, go to that link. It's suns.com/brightside. That's suns.com/brightside, and make a donation. Help us out. It's going to be a really fun night. It always is a fun night. Last time we did this, we sent 4,400 people to a game. It was kids at that point. We used to focus on kids. This year, we're going to take a year off of the kids because of the pandemic, and we're going to focus on the ones most likely to be fully vaccinated and be safest at the games, which is the first responders and the healthcare workers. All right, Damon, tell us where we can find you around the interwebs for people who want to follow Damon after the show.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at I am Damon Allred. I write for Bright Side of the Sun, write for Zona Hoops, write for Roll Call Sportsnet, and do as many podcasts as I can.
All right, thank you. Zona, tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, give David a follow. He does great stuff over at Zona Hoops and Brightside as well, obviously. But yeah, you can find me at zonahoops.com, at zonahoops_ on Twitter. And I feel like we can't end the show without talking really quick about Mikal Bridges. 7 for 7, perfect game. Just have to throw that.
Yeah, how did we
not
even get to Mikal?
Too fired up about DA, but
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I think Mikal deserves a little shout. Awesome game. Wish he would have shot more, but I'll take it.
He was asked after the game, Mikal, real quick. He was asked after the game, were you frustrated that you only got 7 shots when you were perfect from the field? 7 for 7. He had 3 threes and 4 twos, basically, and then also made both free throws. So he's actually 9 of 9 on his shots. And somebody asked him after the game, he's like, man, when you got CP and Devin Booker taking all the shots, 20 shots, 14 shots, there's nothing left to go around. They got to pass the ball more. That's what he is joking. He was laughing about that. DA only got 7 shots as well. The Devin Booker and Chris Paul basically did take most of the shots. Why is that? Because the defense sagged off and made sure nobody else got going. I thought Dallas played really spirited defense over this past 2 days, and they put themselves in position to win. They just couldn't do it.
They look good. I thought
they
were frauds, but their role players stepped up. Obviously with Luka, they're a different team, but they impressed me.
Yeah, even Tim Cato was thinking that their record was misrepresentative of how they had played this year. Their record was better than they had really played. So I thought they looked pretty good. Their role players did step up. Yeah. Any other parting comments, Damon?
Just who's more fun to watch than Mikal? The way he gets after it on both ends, plays so hard, plays so smart. He's just so fun.
Absolutely. Yep. No, Mikal is fun. We'll dedicate a show to Mikal here really soon. We dedicated this one to DA. We'll dedicate one to Booker. We'll dedicate one to CP. We'll dedicate one to Mikal. They all deserve the spotlight. Even the role players deserve the spotlight. I'm going to wait for Campaign to start playing well again before he gets a dedicated show. But yeah, no, I appreciate you guys, the time you gave us today. I appreciate all the folks on the chat who were here live. You guys were great this day and in this show, and I love your comments. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a great Saturday and a great weekend and a great Thanksgiving.